Okay, welcome. We're glad you are joining us this evening for this Zoom session. We're going to introduce you to a very interesting guy that's going to tell you a little bit about his history, and he's going to tell you about his house and why we're here and why I was interested to share this information things that he did to his house. I'm interested to share with you. So hopefully you could think about doing it to your own home. So yes, welcome to Heartland Renewable Energy Society, a Zoom session. And I want to introduce you to Stephen Melton. I met Stephen about a year ago. I actually met him a little bit before that he had a table outside our library in Parkville here. We're in Parkville. And I met him then, and he called me several months later and consulted with me about some things that he could do with his house. So I'll let him introduce himself and tell you a little bit about his background and how he came to this.
Well, hello, and thank you for inviting me to speak to the Heartland Renewable Energy Society. It's quite an honor, and thank you for everybody who's listening. I'm Steve Melton. I live in Parkville, Missouri. I've lived here for not quite 6 years, and I'm an alderman here in Ward 3, so you're sitting in my district here, so this is great. I am a former military officer, so I served an entire career, nearly 40 years in the U.S. Army. I was a tank officer. You've heard about those in Ukraine, and ended up here at Fort Leavenworth in the Kansas City area. And I taught at the Command and General Staff College as a civilian for 12 years. And one of the things I did teaching in the military, at the military school, was talk to the students about future war, and I would talk to them about climate change and how it would be a cause of warfare later on in the century, and the importance of getting a handle on it. When I retired from teaching at the Command and General Staff College, my wife and I moved across the river over into Parkville, because Parkville, face it, is a nicer place than Leavenworth, and it's more centrally located if you want to do things in the metropolitan area.
Sure.
So Parkville is great. We had a house built. So the house that we're in right now is less than 6 years old, and it was built according to building codes, insulation codes, that really haven't changed much since about 2007, even before. I don't think the house was any better insulated than the house that we lived in Leavenworth, which was built in the 1990s.
Right.
So, it's sort of like insulation plateaued, household technology plateaued, but of course global warming continued, and we're getting to the point where we just can't burn fossil fuels like we used to. We can't continue on with this paradigm of we'll build a shell and have it poorly insulated and just burn a lot of fossil fuel to warm the house.
To keep it warm, yeah.
It's just a paradigm that is no longer sustainable given the realities of global warming.
And it was built in 2017, right? Is that what?
This house,
this house.
2017 is when we occupied it. It was built, like I said, according to code. I asked the builder, I said, well, can we build it, with more insulation? He looked at me and says, I build them to code. No, I don't do that kind of work. Which might lead to an interesting discussion later on. So I remained active in the climate movement. When you're in the Army or working for the Army, you don't do political stuff. But after I left the employment of the Army, I joined Citizens Climate Lobby here, the Kansas City chapter, and shortly thereafter became the chapter leader for the chapter. And a great volunteer gig, cost me money to be the chapter leader because of buying handouts and all kinds of things. And what you see behind us, this Vote Climate campaign, is sort of, Vote Climate for the Children is our brand if you speak. Because if you don't vote climate, if you don't vote for candidates who are going to do the work to stop climate change, it won't happen.
That's correct.
So ultimately, as we saw with the tree ordinance that was just passed in Kansas City, or with, the new 2021 international energy conservation codes that were passed in Kansas City last year. If you don't have people on your city councils, if you don't have people in your state houses and in the national government who are willing to vote for climate action to stop climate change, it won't happen. If you vote these people in, then we have a chance.
We have a chance.
Okay? We have a chance.
Yeah.
So, I'm kind of the glass is half full. We have a chance, but we could certainly improve our opportunity, if we had the right people voted into office. So a little bit about the house. As I said, it's 6 years old. It's in Parkville, Missouri. It's a reverse 1.5 split, is I think what they call these. It's huge for my wife and I. It's 2,300 square feet on the main floor, and then the heated spaces downstairs are about another 12 or 1,300 square feet. So it's a big house. And then, of course, downstairs is also storage and mechanical areas, and we'll see those later on the film,
Sure.
I guess.
Yep, yes, we will.
And so, that gives you a size of the house. It was built with R48 insulation up in the attic, just blown fiberglass. And this story that we're on now, the main story, has 2x4 studs and fiberglass insulation between the studs, which is code. Downstairs, it's 6-inch studs with fiberglass insulation. So, that's how it was built. It was built with like a builder's grade air conditioning system and gas furnace. It also had a gas heater for water heater. And it was built, when we had it built, we had an electric cooktop put in. So we have an induction stove. But, after being in Citizens Climate Lobby and, pressing for electrification of households, I finally said, well, I need to electrify my household. Then I got somebody out to look at solar panels just briefly, but the way the roof is built, it won't accommodate solar panels. So I went to Arcadia Power and contracted with them for my power. So I still get my power from KCP&L, Evergy now,
yeah.
Evergy, but I pay for 100% wind energy. So I pay a surplus, a 10% surtax or more, so that all my electrical use is offset by them buying additional wind energy.
Now, about how much per month does that add to your bill?
It's over 10%,
So
which is like $20. It depends on the month.
It depends on the month.
But
True.
The biggest month would be about $20. I'm fortunate that I don't have to worry about those kinds of sums of money. But I said, well, I'm going to go all electric. I'm just, and I'm going to see if I can turn this house into an all electric house. Because while we're fighting for building codes so that we can electrify new houses, the reality is that 95%, 99% of the houses were built with inadequate insulation to have gas furnaces, in this area. And retrofitting those houses is key to solving the emissions problem that emanates from houses. So I said, I'm going to take my house, my wife's house, and I'm going to experiment to see what we can do. And so I got all the house insulated insofar as I could, and mainly that's in the attic, having all the old fiberglass removed, having it foamed up there
Yeah,
around the rim joists.
we're going to talk about that when we get
Okay.
down there. But before
Right.
that happened, tell
Sure.
them what you had contacted a person to give you an energy audit prior to that.
Right. Okay.
Talk a little bit about that.
Right.
And how that went.
Okay. And this was just a few months after I moved into the house. And I sort of expected that the house, having been built 20 years after my house in Leavenworth, that it would be more energy efficient. But it wasn't. My sense was that this was about the same kind of, cold, not drafty, but cold, energy inefficient house that we had in Leavenworth. So I had an energy auditor come in and do an energy audit, and he did the pressure test, where they see if the vapor barriers are right. And the house does pretty good on the pressure test. He says well above code on the pressure test. But when he took pictures of the walls, you could see every stud in the exterior walls. Mm-hmm. So, what you had, thermodynamically, because, thermodynamics, the heat moves towards cold, right? And is you had heat moving through the walls on the studs. Because if you look at it from sideways, you got, your sheetrock in here where the studs are, then you have a stud, then you have your exterior siding. And that just conducts heat out of the house.
Right, directly.
In the winter, or in the summer, heat into the house. And so that increases your heating costs and your cooling costs for most of the months of the year. So, but there's nothing I can do about that now. I thought long and hard about having the house resided and the additional insulation put in, which would be like an inch or two of foam, but which the 2021 codes call for.
Right.
But I said, Jan, that's just a lot.
That's a
let's
lot.
see what I can do first.
Yeah.
So I said, let's concentrate on the attic, because most of the heat loss is through the attic. And, let's concentrate on the attic first with the insulation. And then also on the basement, because the concrete down in the basement really conducts heat out of and into the basement. So I said maybe we can do, some really good insulation work there, and then get an electric furnace, get go all electric, and see how the house performs. Now, of course, when you're gambling with your wife's comfort, during the winter, it was sort of like, I'm not going to spare any expense. I'm not going to do this cheap and then find out that I'm, 3 or 4 degrees off. The house is going to need to be comfortable. So when I got contracted with Mission to do the work, I told them, make sure that this thing works. And it worked. Mm-hmm. So last winter was the first winter that we spent in the house, and it wasn't not an awful winter.
No, it
was. It may
not
be the new
super
normal,
cold, yeah.
but it wasn't an awful winter. I remember worse. But that week before Christmas was really cold.
It was brutal.
And it was brutal, and at many times not even getting above 0 during the day, and but the system performed well. So I guess I feel it's been very successful.
Well, and contrary to what I have been told or what thought might happen, is then after you had the blower guy come do the blower door test and you had the energy audit, you called me.
Right.
And I came in and we talked to, and I consulted with, when you told me that you wanted to do a heat pump.
Yeah.
And so I called a heating and air guy that I'd known for a long time and asked him his opinion, and he said he would never put an air-to-air heat exchanger in an unsealed, poorly insulated house. He said that you will not be comfortable.
Yeah.
So that was the message that I got from him.
And that is what most people would say. But heat pumps have gotten a lot better. And in fact, most houses, there were more heat pumps sold in the United States last year than there were gas furnaces. So, and they weren't just in, California and,
Florida, yeah.
Florida, areas like that, but, up in the Midwest, I mean, in Quebec, where it's cold. If you've ever been in Quebec in the winter, it's cold.
Yeah.
You can't buy gas furnaces anymore. You have to buy heat pumps. So the air exchange heat pumps really worked well. I can't say that it's all air exchange. So when we go down and look at it, there's some, what would you call it? I guess conventional electric heating on top of it. So when it gets, really cold outside, well below freezing, and the heat pump can't generate enough heat to keep the
Right.
to keep the house comfortable, then the coils kick in. Yeah, and, but that's fine. Now, I felt that I might have to buy, like, one of those, what do you call it, pellet stoves.
Yeah, or something like that, yeah.
Yeah, a pellet stove to put in, is where the fireplace was, so when it got really cold, I could have some backup heat, from burning a little bit of wood, but never saw the need for it. So the house stayed very comfortable, and I got to say, more comfortable than when I had the gas furnace. When the gas furnace came, people have gas furnaces. They have the thermostats, and they know the house gets cold, and then the gas furnace kicks in, and then it gets warm, and then it goes back and gets cold, and you have this up and down cycling. But with the heat pump that they installed, I never really felt that at all. It just seemed it's very quiet, much quieter, and the rooms were constantly comfortable. So I am very pleased with it.
To reiterate to people, this is an air-to-air heat pump, not a geothermal heat pump.
No, I looked into
I know you investigated that.
And they were extremely expensive. And because of the way the lot is, to put one in would, they have to bring in a huge truck,
machinery,
to drill it, and it just, there's no place to do it on the property. So no, I didn't go geothermal. I went air to air. But the more I read, the more I was convinced that it could handle it, that the new models could handle it. I got to say, I went to some vendors when I was looking for vendors, and a lot of them wouldn't touch it. They said, no, we don't do that kind of thing. No, we didn't. But Mission says, oh yeah, we can set you up. And Mission, I was pleased with them, but I hear that there's other vendors who are also in that business who will do a great job.
Sure.
Who we could recommend. And then, of course, getting Hayes.
So after I was here,
right.
and then we got Mike O'Connell with Hayes Insulation involved, and he came and did some magic stuff.
And he was great. He was great, and his whole crew was great. Everybody I worked with was great, and but they were very interested in this project too, because I think I'm one of the first people in the area to see if this is really doable with the current technology. And I thought it was important that, if I'm going to go out and talk the talk, I need to walk the walk. And now I feel very comfortable walking the walk and talking the talk.
All right.
Right, and I don't feel like I need to run out and get a pellet stove, to put in the house.
And you haven't needed a space heater.
No, we never. That's a great point. Is that, in the room we're in now, when I had the gas furnace, I would always have a space heater in here. I was always using space heaters in this room. But I didn't this year, I didn't this year, and
could be
and little Casey, you met him out there, and the other grandkids, they loved playing downstairs during the winter when they were here because they got this big space down there, and not a lot of stuff that
they can damage. Yeah,
that they can damage. So they love to go down there and play. Casey loves to go play in the storage room downstairs, and those were just really cold before we put in the insulation.
Yeah.
The whole lower floor was, and it is a little cooler. I mean, it is down
Downstairs,
It's
yeah.
downstairs after all. But we never even used any space heaters down there. So
Okay.
very successful.
Great. Well, why don't we go have a look at some of these things that you did, and you can talk a little bit more about them there.
Okay, super.
Okay. Well, now we're gonna show you Stephen's energy recovery ventilator, which, because if you do a lot of spray foaming in your house, which then Stephen did, because we went up into his attic and we sucked out all the old fiberglass insulation, and they used what kind of depth did they do on the spray foam?
They did all the rim joists and every place that was open
right.
where there was a cut. So it's completely sealed,
Right.
the attic.
So they sealed all the penetrations that came up from
Right.
the main floor up into the attic space. When they got all the old insulation out, they wanted to use spray foam and close up all those. So then I told Stephen that, if we did that, there was a chance that we might need an energy recovery ventilator. So he went ahead and asked Mission to go ahead and install one for him. So this is his energy recovery ventilator, that it pulls air from bathrooms and kitchens. Is that where only two places?
It plugs in to the heating and cooling system up here through these ducts, and then it comes out into the room through that duct there, and then these are input and output to get
the air exchange
from the outside.
Yeah, the air exchange happens.
And then this is where all the miracle happens in here with the motor. And this can be set up so that it runs like 10 minutes every hour, or it can be set up so that it just runs constantly or never at all. And what I do, because the thing is probably too big for the house, but what I do, because this is right below the living room, is whenever we go out for a walk or leave the house, maybe once a week, we leave for an hour. So I just turn the thing on, and it just vents continuously. And then when I come home, we turn it off.
Really?
Which works fine. And the house is very comfortable. When we do that, I turn on the fan for above the stove, and also turn on the bathroom fans above the showers, to get more
so they don't
draw around the house.
Do you have actual vents, ERV vents in the kitchen and bathroom, or not?
I don't know what an
one?
ERV vent is.
This
like
this is the ERV,
No,
but it's a special vent that comes from those rooms.
No, I don't think they're special vents.
So this is it just intakes right here?
Yes.
So that's just an air intake and exchanging the air. Okay.
Right, exactly.
All right. So this is not a typical ERV, but it was because it was put in after the fact. This is what happened to happen. But when you build a house, the proper installation of an ERV is that you would have vents in kitchens and bathrooms that would, when you have it on, suck the stale air out of the house and eject it, and then bring in fresh air.
Yeah.
But this is because this was a retrofit. This is the way that was installed.
And this was the only place they could put it.
Right.
Yeah.
Because we'll show you the other mechanical room.
Right. They wanted to put it in the other mechanical room, but there wasn't room. I'd like you to pan over here. These are the space heaters, which we never used last winter.
Never needed
for
to
the
use.
first time.
Yeah.
Because the house was much more comfortable. They just sat there all
That's
winter
great.
long.
Okay.
Okay.
And we'll go look at the mechanical room.
We're now in the mechanical room where the heater and the water heater are, but first I'd like to introduce my grandson, Casey. And Casey and his other grandsons and all the kids their age are why I did this. I will spare no expense to save the planet for these kids, okay? So they can enjoy the planet when they're my age.
That's right.
Okay? And so here we have the water heater. I had them put in a all-electric water heater. It's huge, but if we have guests, we might need it. And you see behind the water heater, the foam board that extends the whole, behind that would be concrete. Here is our new heater. We use the existing ducting, too late to change it. And in here we have the interior heat exchanger for the heat pump, which is outside, and then up here someplace, in here someplace, are two like toasters, with just convection, is that right? Convection heaters, like you'd find in a normal electric heating place, heating system. where they don't have access to natural gas.
Yeah.
So what happens is when the heat pump can no longer generate enough heat when it gets so cold that it can no longer generate enough heat to heat the house, then the electric convection coils kick in.
Electric coils kick in, yeah.
Right. And now we're further into the mechanical room, and here you can see up there, you can see all the foaming that was done around the foam joist. They put a lot of foam up here to give insulation and vapor barrier, I guess, against the house. They also foamed down here the air exchanger outside unit. The heat exchanger is out here, and you see here the pipe. This is where the natural gas used to come into the house, but you can see that it's sealed off. We no longer use natural gas. I called up Spire, told them to shut off the natural gas, and they said, where would we forward the bill to? And I said, just send it to the same address, the final bill. Yeah, so I no longer use any natural gas in this house. Okay, and this is the electrical panel. You got to have enough juice to come in, and this is a 200 amp
200
panel.
amp panel.
Right, and you can see all the new breakers they put in for the furnace here. This is for the water, the electric water heater, and this is for the car charger. We put a car charger for an EV out in the garage, and we don't have the EV yet. Last year was not a good year to buy an EV, but the next car we get is going to be an EV, and it's going to have its own charger out there.
Is the charger out there yet or not?
No,
just the
because
wiring.
that's specific to the vehicle. So,
Okay. Oh, that's
you know, if you go buy a Tesla, you get the Tesla charger, for
Right.
instance. Right.
Okay. So yeah, you just have to make sure that you've got a big enough electrical panel to start with, or
Right.
else you need to upgrade your electrical panel to accommodate all the going electrical instead of using the gas.
Right,
So,
right. And I've just got one spare.
one
now.
spare left.
I've got
All
one
right.
spare. Okay, now we're looking up in the attic where a lot of work was done that made this project successful. What the HRES insulation folks did was take out all the fiberglass insulation that had been blown in here. They said it was about R48. And then what they did was they vacuumed it all out, and then they spray foamed around the joists. They spray foamed around all the, where the can lights come down, any kind of hole in the ceiling, and sealed the lower part of the attic completely.
Yeah, all the penetrations where wiring or plumbing would come up through an attic. That's what they tried to get sealed.
Right. And then they came in with cellulose and blew it all in. The ceiling is kind of irregular, and you can see that when you look at the blown cellulose, but they say it's about an R60 up there, on average, and it performed really well. Very pleased with the insulation in the attic and how well it performed during the winter.
Great.
The bad news is that all this work wasn't free. I used two vendors, Mission Heating and Plumbing and HRES Insulation. I didn't do a whole lot of shopping around. And, they charged me, I think, a fair price for what they did. If I had done this 2 years later, not last year, but next year, almost all the expense would have been paid for by the Inflation Reduction Act, which was passed in 1922. Or 2022. Well, yeah, not quite.
1922.
Which is a 10-year program to get houses to electrify. Okay, what it wants to do is electrify households across the nation. And so, for instance, what these allow is for tax credits at the end of the year for electrification that you do, and also state-run point-of-sale discounts or rebates for the things you buy to put in your home.
Like an induction stove.
Like an induction stove. So if you get an induction stove, now the example I have is from New York. Missouri and Kansas are developing their own programs, but they ought to be fairly similar because they're given the same amount of money by the federal government to run the programs. So, for instance, if you put in an induction stove, you get an $840 upfront discount.
Rebate for
Rebate on your purchase.
Yeah.
If you put in an electric heat pump, and again, this is in New York, you get an $8,000 upfront rebate on your air exchange heat pump, plus a $2,000 tax credit. If you put in rooftop solar, you get a 30% tax credit up to $5,700. For basic weatherization, $1,600 upfront rebate and a $1,200 tax credit.
And I think that would, your insulation and things that you did would qualify for that weatherization things.
Exactly.
Right?
So
Yeah.
they would have paid a lot of the insulation costs. For an electric vehicle, you can get $7,500 tax credit for a new electrical vehicle. For electrical panel, and we talked about the electrical panel, you can get a $4,000 upfront discount and a $600 tax credit. So that's just some of the stuff. For a heat pump water heater, you can get a $1,750 upfront discount and a $2,000 tax credit. So there's a lot of money that's being thrown at homeowners like you to take this 10-year window of opportunity and electrify your house. The government will pay, maybe not every dollar of it, but most of the cost of doing it will be paid for by the federal government and by your states through their point of sale discount programs. So that is tremendous news, and I hope all of you take advantage of it.
So thank you very much for attending our Zoom session. And now we're going to we'll be going and letting Stephen answer your questions that you might have. So thanks very much.